Hello and welcome to another episode of my Kerbal Space Program science playthrough in the JNSQ Planet Pack. If you thought you were looking at the estranged love child of the Saturn V and the SLS, that would be an understandable thing to say. However, you would be wrong. You are looking at a little rocket I am calling the Athena Super Heavy. And this thing is launching a space station and 3 Kerbals to orbit around Minmus. The station in question is called Athena Station, as it was originally going to be launched off of the same rocket as the Athena missions to Eve. And this thing is running off of 5 vector engines and 2 twin Bohr boosters. The vector being basically Kerbal Space Program's equivalent to the Space Shuttle main engine, otherwise known as the RS-25, and the Bohr being Kerbal Space Program's equivalent to the F-1B, which was a real-life engine, or never really made it off the drawing board. It was basically... The F-1B was a engine concept that would have basically been a modernized version of the F-1 engine used on the Saturn V from the Apollo program, and it would have been used on liquid-fueled boosters that could have gone onto SLS but this was canceled in favor of solid rocket boosters. The second stage has now ignited, and this is being run off of... This is running 4 sorry, it's the name of the general from the Civil War, but I can't get it right for some reason. Ulysses. Okay, here you can see this next stage here is running off of 4 Ulysses engines, which are basically the cryogenic engines mod version of the J2X, which is once again a modernized version of an Apollo engine, this time the engine used on the second and third stages of the Saturn V. It was also used on the second stage of the Saturn 1B, I believe. Although this is kind of weird, because Kerbal Space Program pretty much already has an in-game equivalent to the J2X in the form of the Rhino engine, and this mod comes with a patch that makes that engine, among others, run on cryogenic fuel, so it's not like this engine was just completely necessary to add into the game, but whatever, it's here. It's better than the Rhino, if I understand correctly, so I might as well use it, I guess. And so yeah, did I already mention that this thing is going to Minmus? Because like this thing is basically just kind of a upgraded version of the Atlantis station, I guess is what I was calling it, around the Mun. And this thing is going to do the exact same thing. It's going to launch 3 Kerbals in a lab to Minmus, and then it's going to have a thing where the Kerbals leave the lab in a little spacecraft that undocks from it, and then that lab can be added upon later. And one thing I would change about this is I would add some RCS pods to the bottom of the third stage, because, you know, as long as I'm just mixing and matching Apollo and Artemis bits, I might as well rip off the S4B while I'm at it. Because I really wish this thing was more maneuverable. Luckily I had the RCS on the command pod to maneuver this thing, but I could have done better. And I would like to remind you this footage is sped up by at least 2 times as fast as it normally is. So this took a lot longer than you're seeing. And so I believe this is warping to its circularization around Kerbin. And that's what this burn should be. And then, assuming I'm right, the next one will be a injection burn to put this thing on a flyby of Minmus, not the Mun, of Minmus. But yeah, and weird thing I want to bring up, just because it's kind of a realization I've had. This rocket and the Athena launch vehicle kind of have like a bit of a Saturn V and a Saturn 1B thing going on, where like one's kind of a, I don't know, not really an upgrade, but like a, not really a sized up version, but you get what I'm saying, right? Like one's the smaller one of the same family of rocket, the other's the larger. And one thing you may notice is I put this thing in a really high orbit of Kerbin, or higher than what I normally do. That was because I had the HUD turned off, because I was trying to be a little bit cinematic about launching this, but MacJeb's autopilot feature was being a bit screwy, so I wasn't using that during launch, and so this happened. But anyways, here you can see now I'm just using MacJeb's docking autopilot to turn this thing around and dock it to the lab. And then from there I can just deploy all the antennas and whatnot. And you may notice a little white dish that popped out. That is actually a reflector, and it has an antenna feed pointing at it. And what that does is a little thing sends a signal to it, and that signal is like bounced off and amplified. And it's a weird little thing from the Near Future Exploration mod. I don't know why I'm pointing this out, but actually I'm pointing this out because I'm making commentary. I'm supposed to explain these things. Why am I acting like I'm doing something wrong here? And yeah, you can see the little spacecraft that the Kerbals are in is very Apollo-esque. And that was very intentional. I mean, if this thing was like powered by fuel cells instead of solar panels, it would basically be an Apollo command and service module. But yeah, I mean, it's even using the Kerbal version of the I can't remember the full name of it. It's AJ-10 something is the name of the engine that was used on the Apollo command and service module. But yeah, it's got like the Wolfhound engine, which is basically the game's version of that, or I guess I should say the Making History DLC's version. And here you can see the little Minmus insertion being done. And then once here, I end up having to like go in manually and run the experiments, because I've already been to Minmus before, so the X-Science mod, which is what I usually do to run experiments in places, isn't going to pick it up as any new science to be done, so those experiments are not going to do anything. They're just going to be sitting there inactive unless I manually go in and run each one of them. I really should have set all this to an action group in the VAB, or even just, you know, gone to that screen and done it, but I didn't really feel like it, so I didn't do it. So now you can see this thing is going to space near Minmus, where it will run the experiments after circularizing the orbit, or at least that's what I think is happening here, because I found out something. Labs process data into science more quickly from a low orbit than a high orbit. So rather than have it in a high or even an elliptical orbit, I decided to just go for this. And so yeah, the only new thing that hasn't been done before is that soil scanner. which I had a little bit of trouble with getting it deployed, but once I shut off its ability to transmit science, it started working. And you may notice something. The previous mission I launched that used Kerbal Station expansion parts didn't have interiors. I updated to the newest version of that, and now it does. And oh wow, this is convenient. I'm looking around inside. I don't know what particular one, but I believe this is part of some... I believe this particular part is inspired by some Russian space station module, but I may be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's based off of one of Russia's modules, either from Mir or the ISS, but I don't know for sure, and I really don't know where I could look to back this up, so this is just kind of a hunch I have. And so now what I'm doing is I'm setting an alarm in Kerbal Alarm Clock, and then I am launching the next big part of this video, which is what I am calling the Ares 1 probe that is going to Duna. And it's just using the same naming convention as Athena, you know. The real-life counterpart to Duna is Mars. Mars is named after the Roman god of war. Said Roman god's Greek equivalent is Ares, hence the name Ares 1. Or this may just be called Ares, I don't know. But let's go with calling this Ares 1, because there will be future probes to Duna. Especially because of like how practically bare bones this was. Or not really bare bones, it was just kind of a... I don't know, it didn't really have any goals outside of get a probe on the surface of Duna. Next time I'm thinking about doing something that'll have more long-term consequences or effects. I don't know, but here you can see that Ulysses, I want to say it's Ulysses, because I'm pretty sure that's the name of the Civil War general that was, you know, the main general for the Union during the Civil War was Ulysses, wasn't it? Or is it Ulysses? I don't know, but I think it's named after Ulysses S. Grant, if I didn't know any better. But anyways, here you can see this. If this looks familiar to you, that's because this is just basically the Athena probe, but the little bit on the tip that comes off has landing legs. Like, that's the only difference here. I didn't even bother to take the decoupler off that separates the fairing from the little rocket that deorbits it, and I wish I had, but I didn't, so it's just dead weight, and something that could completely ruin the mission if I had accidentally staged it. Luckily I noticed this, and I moved it all the way up to the top of the staging arrangement, so that way if it did get set off, it wouldn't be set off after anything that was meant to be. It's like basically, for that to get set off, I would first have to set off the fairing and the parachute. And you know, I never really got a good amount of time to explain nuclear thermal rockets in the last video. But everything I said was basically all that I know. They work by running a propellant past a nuclear reactor, and then that heat causes the propellant to expand, and with nowhere to go, that gas just kind of blows out of the nozzle, and you know, every action has an equal and opposite reaction. The gas pushes on the rocket, and yeah, that's that. And so here I went ahead and switched back to the Athens station and transmitted its science. And then once that was done, I switched back to the Ares probe and began the trip to Duna. Now, originally I was going to do a mid-course correction to lower periapsis, so that way I could have an easier time inserting myself into an orbit around Duna, but I realized periapsis was already low enough. So I just kind of went with it, and then I realized I could use a gravity assist off of Ike to put myself into an orbit while using less fuel than if I just put myself into an orbit the old-fashioned way. Gravity assist being using the gravity of another body to slow yourself down or speed yourself up. Or I guess I should say slow down or speed up something, but you know what I mean. Also, I just realized I don't think I ever got a good opportunity to explain the Athena launch vehicle. It's like, basically what it was is it was just first stage of 2 bore boosters and 4 vector engines, and then you had a well, let's say third stage of 1 Ulysses engine. That was about it. Probably should have explained that during the launch, but oh well, you can go back and you'll see what I'm talking about. And the reason I say third stage is because technically the second stage is the decoupling of the bore boosters. And did I just say RS-25 whenever I was talking about the rocket? Because I meant to say vector engines. Or I may have said KS-25, which is the other thing you can call it while still referring to its in-game name. And so there you can see my reports while flying over Minmus. Just, you know, you can read these if you'd like. I'm not really going to. And now here's something interesting. Ike has less gravity than Duna, which means maneuvers done around Ike cost less fuel than those done around Duna. So here you can see I just kind of plotted out a little maneuver to even further lower my orbit, so that way whenever I get into an even lower orbit than this to land the probe on Duna, I'll have as much fuel as possible available for that. Or at least that was my reasoning behind this. I don't know if that's actually how it went, but it worked nonetheless, so let's just say this went exactly as I planned. And the reason I want a lower orbit is because that means that the probe is going slower, which means there's less of a chance of the probe getting destroyed while entering the atmosphere. And this Ike flyby also has the added bonus of another opportunity to do experiments to get even more data out of this mission. As you can see there. And here I had a problem. This experiment that has like 2 mystery goo samples accidentally wasted one of its samples on Ike whenever I wanted to use it once I was landed on Duna. The other sample was ran while in space high above Duna. There you can see, after struggling with it for a bit, I got it, and now I was just plotting out the maneuver to lower my periapsis around Duna. And after looking through its information, I found out that Duna's atmosphere ends at 70 kilometers. That number sounds familiar. That is because 70 kilometers is where Kerbin's atmosphere ends in the stock solar system. But yeah, you know, I went ahead and just plotted out something that would get my periapsis around Duna lowered to about that. My periapsis being the closest point in my orbit to Duna. But yeah, there you can see now I am doing this burn, And then I kind of ended up having to, or no, this is exactly what I ended up having to do. I ended up having to put myself into a elliptical orbit around Duna, as you'll see in a little bit, because I tried doing it where it would be somewhat circular, and then I realized I would end up having to use both of my stages, so I just decided to set a maneuver to use the last of the fuel on the part of the probe that is not going down to the surface. And you can see I almost didn't do that, but I looked at the nav ball, realized what was going to happen, and so I just did a little burn that would just use the last of my fuel just to see what that would look like, and it turned out that was basically all that I needed to do, so it ended up working out fine, well enough in the end. And so I did it, as you'll see here in a little bit. And I really need to quit resorting to nuclear engines for just little probes like this, because there's going to come a point where I want to do manned missions that I'll actually have to plan out better than just making things as overkill as possible. And I'm thinking about doing a manned mission to Eve sometime in the future. I know that sounds like it's going to be extremely difficult, but I have a mod that adds in these nuclear engines that use atmosphere as fuel. So if I can unlock those and get a space plane to Eve, getting to it and back will be pretty easy. I mean, I could make an Eve SSTO with the mods I have installed, or at least I'm pretty sure I could. Don't quote me on that. But yeah, with everything being as well set up as I could get it, the probe that will be landing on Duna has detached, and for some reason I did a whole orbit and then decided to do my Deorbit Burn. And I went with that weird approach where I have like a deorbit that makes my craft go from like being like horizontal to just gradually being going down vertically, or the really shallow re-entry, as I like to call it. And then like a little ways through I realized, wait a minute, this is Duna, the atmosphere is so thin it's barely any different from landing on the Mun. And with that in mind, I started treating it like landing on the Mun. And so yeah, there you can see I just kind of lowered my, I don't know, my fuel, whatever. I slowed down. Okay, that's what I'm trying to say. I slowed down. So yeah, there you can see I slowed down. And then this fairing was really useless considering the point that I got to. And so there you can see I went ahead and popped the fairing and deployed the landing legs. Or extended, I guess I should say. But you know what I mean. And I don't know why I chose to give this thing 3 landing legs instead of 4 like I would anything else. Like, and yeah, the parachute, I should have put 2 of those on there, but I didn't, and so this thing didn't land like going straight down and was kind of inclined a little bit, and it just kind of ended up landing on its side like this. Luckily, that turned out to be just a complete and utter non-issue, which surprised me. Now, this thing landing on its side, not so great, but, it doesn't need to be upright to get back to Kerbin, or get back into orbit or anything like that, so it's not really the end of the world, and I just kind of went with it. And so there you can see I ran all of the experiments, and from there transmitted them. Or eventually I did, anyways. Yeah, there you can see I kind of had to enable the whole allow partial transmission thing, and then I just kind of time warped for a while until everything was transmitted. And so now with 2,195 science points, I just unlocked some things in research and development. The two big important things I unlocked were some of the important things I unlocked were general launch bases, the Saturn mobile launcher, and the shuttle mobile launcher. And then I also unlocked some other things such as scanning tech, which gives me a telescope that is going to be very useful in getting some extra science points. It's actually the same type of telescope as James Webb, which I believe is launching on the 22nd, I want to say. And then I just kind of invested in nuclear power and unmanned tech. And then I think I also went ahead and blew the remainder of my usable science points on advanced exploration, or no, advanced landing is what it was. Yeah, and then 25 isn't enough to do anything with, and here you can see the, we'll just call it Athens Command and Service Module has gone ahead and detached from the station, and the crew are on their way back to Kerbin. And so yeah, this thing will just gradually approach Kerbin, and then it will re-enter. And so, like everything else that has ever returned with crew, while passing through the atmosphere, this thing will run its engine to try and lower apoapsis a little bit further. Or really, when I do that, I'm usually apoapsis being well within the atmosphere is kind of a given. And there you can see I just kind of pointed radial out to put this service module into a position where it wouldn't collide with the command module and cause any issues. And this here command module actually did not slow down enough to re-enter on the first go, so I had to do a couple of passes through the atmosphere before this thing finally was able to splash down in the ocean. But yeah, once it did. I'm honestly surprised I didn't run out of electric charge or anything while waiting for this thing to get to this point. And if I had been running a life support mod, I do not doubt that all 3 of the Kerbals in this thing would be dead by now. But anyways, there you can see all 4 of the parachutes deployed perfectly, although I kind of feel a bit iffy about my decision to not have any drogue chutes to deploy in the upper atmosphere, but if I'm being completely honest, I don't even think I was thinking about it. And so yeah, this thing will just have a nice little splashdown in the ocean any moment now. And just like that. And there you can see my Kerbal's got some ribbons, research 4, Minmus orbit, Kerbin docking, and Bob got the same things as Fredel did, and Valentina has no new ribbons because she's done everything around Minmus. She did so during the Atlantis 1 mission. That was the first Kerbal landing on another body. And so here you can see I just kind of spent science points on nuclear fuel and improved nuclear power, and I almost unlocked some more nuclear stuff and some more rockets, but then I realized I'm going to need better radiators to cool down any reactors I launch, so went ahead and unlocked specialized radiators. And then I went for some habitation stuff, so I'll have gravity rings and whatnot that are completely unnecessary but make it look like I care about my crew's health. And with that all being said, that is the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please consider subscribing. And if you did not like this video, feel free to dislike it so I know I need to do something differently. And if you want to tell me exactly what I did wrong, please consider leaving a comment, as that will not only let me know exactly what I've done wrong, but is also your only means of really letting other people know there's something wrong with this video. And if you enjoy this video, then please feel free to say why in the comments so I know what to do more of going forwards. And if you want to hear about it every single time I upload, please consider subscribing, clicking the bell, and enabling all notifications. That is all from me for now. Goodbye.